Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel, and today it's time for Thick as a Brick in the Wall. I'm going to be counting down my top 10 favorite classic rock concept albums of all time. Just one rule here for this video: I'm only going to be choosing one pick per band to make things harder for myself, and that'll get pretty difficult towards the tail end of this list here, but we get started with my number 10. I'm going to go with Tales of Mystery and Imagination by the Alan Parsons Project. One of my favorite prog rock albums of all time, one of my favorite prog debuts as well. An amazing record here, influenced by the works of Edgar Allan Poe, and like I've said before on the channel, one of my favorite cliches in music is when bands pull from classic literature into their music. Bands or artists, when they do that, I'm just a sucker for that. I love it, and especially when they include it on a concept album like this. Really, really cool here, influenced by Edgar Allan Poe, with standout tracks like The Raven, The Telltale Heart. You have The System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather, The Fall of the House of the Usher, right? Great instrumental in many different parts. Really enjoy that as well. And of course, with just about every Alan Parsons Project record, the musicianship is fantastic. Love the instrumentation, but on this album, I really enjoy the atmosphere. Really able to convey the creepy, haunting vibe that Edgar Allan Poe was able to implement into his writing. So I really enjoy that here. I think they captured it masterfully for the time. Great stuff, in my opinion. Their debut record, the Alan Parsons Project, Tales of Mystery and Imagination, coming in at number 10 here on this list. Number 9, let's go with Joe's Garage. The three-part rock opera later comprised into a triple album box set, hence the acts 1, 2, and 3. So that's what I'm going to be referencing here today, is the triple album box set, which has all three acts together. You know, it's Frank Zappa at its core, and one thing about Zappa is a lot of his albums, and he has many, right? A lot of his albums can be hard to digest upon first listen because there is a lot going on and, you know, a lot of things happening at once, right? A lot of moving parts on Frank Zappa records. So many ideas being thrown at the wall at the same time. So, like a lot of brilliant minds, Zappa was unorthodox and unafraid to be different. And at this time in the music industry, he was unlike anybody else. I think this record is an amazing example of that. As far as my favorite act, it's tough, but I'm going to have to go with Act 1, which I just think has more classic Zappa material, but Act 3 is very close behind. It has some of his best guitar work, in my opinion, so honestly, my favorite act between 1 and 3, it's a toss-up, but just in general, great work on all three acts by Frank Zappa. Really cool concept as well, a lot of thought that went into it, and like I said before, lots of ideas being thrown at the wall there, so that's always something I enjoy in Zappa's work, even though sometimes it does take a bit more time to digest. Following that up now with my number 8, let's go with the Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society, one of the earliest examples of a rock concept album. It's a collection of character studies based on Dylan Thomas's 1954 radio drama Under Milkwood, centering on themes of nostalgia, memory, preservation, and the increasing influence of America on European society. So lots of thought-provoking topics that went into this record here by the Kinks. It's the last to feature the original Kinks lineup as well, but also shows the wide range of influences and styles that the band were able to incorporate, such as folk, blues, psychedelia, and more, all being incorporated here on this record in masterful fashion. You know, not every concept album is deep and thought-provoking. Some of them are just straight-up fun to listen to, and that's where Alice Cooper comes in. So for my number 7, let's go with From the Inside from 1978, one of my all-time favorite Alice Cooper records here, detailing his time in the insane asylum as he was getting clean from alcohol and other substances. I believe it was just predominantly alcohol, but the whole vibe of this record, and this is Alice's words, were once you beat something, you're allowed to make fun of it, right? So this is pretty much Alice making fun of the entire situation, and if you know what happened on the subsequent tour and the few years that would follow into the early 80s, that did not age well at all, but still a fantastic record here by Alice, with some favorite tracks of mine, like From the Inside, The Quiet Room, an all-time favorite Alice Cooper track for me, Nurse Rosetta, Millie and Billy, Sirius is an awesome deep cut, How You Gonna See Me Now was a big hit for Alice, For Veronica's Sake, Jackknife Johnny is awesome, and Inmates, We're All Crazy. Awesome stuff here. This is Alice working with Bernie Taupin, who had, you know, mostly worked with Elton John, but does a fantastic job collaborating with Alice on this record. So I really enjoy it. I love Alice's songwriting and his creativity. And like I said, not every concept album is all that deep and thought-provoking, like I had mentioned. Some of them are just a lot of fun to listen to, and Alice Cooper is a prime example of that here with From the Inside. He does have a few other great concept albums, but in my opinion, this is his best. Number 6, how about 2112 by Rush, particularly side 1, right? Inspired by the dystopian fictional novella Anthem. Side 1 of this classic Rush record, 2112, is occupied by a suite of a science fiction theme composition in 7 parts. The instrumentation here, of course, is amazing. Neil Peart's drumming is out of this world, and Neil Peart was also the band's thematic leader at this point, and the brains behind this concept, so really killer job here by Neil Peart. And also you have Geddy Lee's vocals on the Temples of Syrinx, which are some of my favorite in the Rush catalog. And Rush also went on to make a visualizer for all 20 minutes of the song, which is on YouTube, and it's a fantastic watch that provides some sick imagery to 2112 as well, so definitely worth checking out. The only reason it's not ranked higher here on this list is because it's only side 1 of this record, and side 2 is not conceptual, so that's why I didn't include it any higher, but side 1 is fantastic and absolutely belongs on this list here, so that's it for my number 6. Let's go with 2112 by Rush. We break into the top 5 now with the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is a record that is supposed to tell the story, or be from the perspective of a live touring band, that being the fictitious Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. From tracks here, such as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, all the way through the reprise at the end. It's supposed to be like a continual concert from the group, which is a very innovative type of idea here that I really enjoy. But on top of that, innovative is, only the first word that comes to mind, but there are so many different adjectives you could use to describe this record. So influential as well. History being made here in a lot of respects. So many different genres would go on to be influenced by this record and by the Beatles' creativity here on Sgt. Pepper. Some amazing instrumentation and experimentation going on by the band during their psychedelic period. Then, of course, it closes out with A Day in the Life, which, for my money, is the best rock song of all time. So, sorry to all you Stairway to Heaven fans, but I just prefer A Day in the Life a little bit more. And, when it comes down to it here, it's a tremendous concept, very innovative for its time, like I had said, but there are some that are conceptually stronger, which is why it's in the top 5, but not at, like, my number 1 or number 2. However, it is my favorite rock album of all time, which is probably why it was propelled into my top 5, so for me, I definitely needed to include it here in the top 5, but I recognize that there are some conceptually stronger records out there, so that said, my number 5 here on the list is going to go with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. At number 4, we have the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Now, David Bowie was just an absolute legend in every respect of the word, right? Somebody who was a master at reinvention, had a tremendous mind for music, was so creative, and did amazing work across multiple decades, right? Across multiple different eras of music as well. But this, in my opinion, is his masterpiece here, Ziggy Stardust. Great concept album, right, with some really fantastic tracks like 5 Years, So Love, Moon Age Daydream, Starman, Lady Stardust, Hang On To Yourself, Ziggy Stardust, Suffragette City, one of my all-time favorite Bowie tracks, and then, of course, to close things out, you have Rock and Roll Suicide, one of my all-time favorite rock album closers. So Bowie really outdoes himself here, in my opinion. Really cool concept, like I said, some of his best lyrics on display as well, and so, for somebody like David Bowie, who has so many great albums out there, it's hard to pinpoint a favorite, but this is my favorite Bowie record, and comes at, in my opinion, the peak of his creativity, so a fantastic album here that definitely belongs in the top 5. I'm going to go with The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and The Spiders from Mars by David Bowie. Top 3 now, for my number 3, let's go with Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull, and now, like I said, I'm limiting myself to one pick per band, and it definitely makes it difficult with Tull here, because I just as easily could have gone with Aqualung, for example, but I'm going to go with Thick as a Brick here, because, I think obviously it's a great record, but great parody or pastiche, if you will, of a concept album, and possibly a bit ahead of its time, considering this came out in 1971, and the 70s would go on to be really the decade of the concept album in a lot of respects. So, parody or not, this record is a stroke of genius, in my opinion, centering around one continuous piece of music over 2 sides of the record here, showcasing the creativity and musicianship of the band. So with that in mind, for Jethro Tull here, I definitely had to go with Thick as a Brick. Fantastic record, really interesting concept as well, or parody, whatever you want to call it, but just great career-defining work here by Tull that had to make it in the top 3. At number 2, I'm going to go with Quadrophenia by The Who. Now, this was definitely difficult because, again, one per band, and obviously when it comes to The Who, they have 2 great concept albums, that being Tommy and Quadrophenia, so I thought about, going with Tommy here as well, but ultimately I think Quadrophenia is the band at their creative peak. I think this is Pete Townsend, who was the band's primary songwriter at his, best in terms of being a lyricist, so I really enjoy this record a little bit more than Tommy as well, and I think it has some of those powerful vocals by Roger Daltrey in the Who catalog, so for that, I had to go with Quadrophenia here over Tommy, with some awesome standout tracks like The Real Me, one of my all-time favorite Who songs, Quadrophenia, Cut My Hair, The Punk Meets the Godfather, I'm One, Helpless Dancer, I've Had Enough, and then, of course, you have Love, Rain Over Me to close things out. It's a tremendous double album here, a really cool concept, and a great story being told throughout that I thoroughly enjoy. So with that in mind, for my number 2, let's go with Quadrophenia from 1973 by The Who. And finally, coming in at number 1, I'm going to go with The Wall by Pink Floyd from 1979. One of my favorite albums of all time. Maybe a bit predictable here for my number 1, but it is difficult that, I had to pick one per band because Floyd have a lot of great records that could be deemed as conceptual, but this one takes the cake for me here. I mean, looking at the track listing, there's not a bad song on here, and everything is done really well to progress the story, but what I love about the story is just how you could trace back so many different elements here throughout this album. Elements of isolation, loneliness, depression, anxiety, all on this record. That's really interesting to me, how you can kind of analyze this album from a number of different themes, and that's what I find to be the most interesting. Roger Waters, of course, a very controversial figure now, but back in his prime here, did some amazing work as the band's thematic leader, and this album right here is probably his masterpiece. The Wall is just tremendous and a great showcase of what the band could do from a creative standpoint, even as there would grow to be friction and tension in the band as Roger would take over more and more and have more influence over the group. But produced by Bob Ezrin, he does a fantastic job as well. It's got some great Gilmore guitar solos and vocals to boot, so really, really great stuff. I don't have to tell you guys on why The Wall is a classic album, but it is my favorite concept album of all time when it comes to some of the best in rock history. So that said, it's going to be my number 1 here today. Got to go with The Wall by Pink Floyd. So that wraps up Thick as a Brick in the Wall, an examination of my 10 favorite rock concept albums of all time, which I will be doing a sequel to for heavy metal concept records because there's a lot to talk about there as well. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you never miss a new upload, and let me know down in the comment section below what are your thoughts on my list. You can see that right over here. And what are some of your picks as well? I want to hear about some of your favorite rock concept albums out there. Just please let me know all that good stuff down in the comments. I definitely want to hear from you. And until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.